Hello everyone. In this video, I will say a few things about the book Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book is relatively shorter compared to the other major or well-known works of Dostoevsky, like Crime and Punishment or Brothers Karamazov or The Idiot. But despite its size, it is extremely rich and important, especially from a psychological standpoint. Any work that is so great, that has this kind of literary status, can lend itself to many different interpretations, readings, and even all the positive reviews of such a work could differ from each other. We can have many different positive reviews of this work from literary perspectives, psychological perspectives, philosophical perspectives. For me, the theme that stands out in my mind when I think about this book now is a theme of the twisted mind. And what does it mean to have a mind that is twisted, a state of mind that is twisted, and a corresponding world that appears as a twisted world? So I want to draw a connection to another video on this channel, which is a conversation, an interview with Adam Robert. In that conversation with Adam, one of the things that we talked about was the concept of epoche. Epoche, or suspension, or bracketing out of prior judgments and theories. We talked about how epoche is a position, is an attitude that philosophers try to achieve, try to occupy that attitude. And we talked about how it could be described as an unburdening of the world and one's own mind. So unburdening in two complementary sense of the word unburden. On the one hand, you unburden objects, events, situations. You unburden them from the meaning that they might have, from the typical meaning that you assign to them, from the way that you tend to interpret them. You unburden them from those meanings, and that allows us to give them, or to find different ways of giving meaning to them, different ways in which the same situation, the same object, the same event can be burdened in a different way, can have a different meaning. We also talked about how this unburdening has a corresponding sign in one's own mind. A person, a philosopher, to do the epoche, to perform the epoche, has to be unburdened. A philosopher shouldn't be in a state of emergency, shouldn't have some urgent goal, urgent desire that needs to be fulfilled. It is very difficult to suspend your judgment or bracket out interpretations if you are in a state of emergency, if you have something urgent that is going on. If, for example, I'm looking at a bottle of water and I'm very thirsty, my range of interpretations of the way I'm seeing that bottle of water is going to be very narrow, very specific, and in relation to my own need of wanting to drink water. But if I'm not in an urgent state of needing water, if I'm not extremely thirsty, then I can suspend my usual judgments, my usual way of looking at the bottle, and I can find, ultimately I can find different ways in which the bottle shows up for me, can show up for me. So epoche and the theme of unburdening and being unburdened. Now let's move that, let's try to carry that forward to the theme of the twisted mind or the twisted world, which we read about in this great work, Notes from the Underground. So what does it mean to have a twisted state of mind? It means that, again, that there are two complementary sides to it. What we read in the book is the perspective of this person who is talking about his own state of mind and his experiences. So on the one hand, the situations that he encounters, the events that happen, other people that he sees, these are all viewed and interpreted in a way that is twisted. These are all, the world and all that is showing up within it is perceived and interpreted in a twisted way, in a fragmented way, in a disorganized way. And there is also inside the world, his interior world, his inner experience, his private experience, also has twists. It is twisted. What do I mean by twist exactly? It has to do with conflicts. But conflict suggests something very simple, like there's one arrow or one force going in this direction, and there's another force going in the opposite direction, and there's a conflict between the two. But twist is a little bit more dramatic than that. When I talk about a twisted state of mind or a twisted world, I'm literally imagining some substance or a plane or a shape that is being pulled in or being turned around or disfigured by opposing forces. And because of the opposing forces, the shape of the object is being disfigured, as I said, is changing, is transforming in a way that we can say it is turning into a shape that is not natural to it, because it is not a single force that is being applied to it, or a single force that it applies to itself. So the twisted state of mind or the twisted world has to do with conflict. It results from ongoing and continuous conflict among opposing and irreconcilable forces. Some example of conflict that we hear about in the book: the conflict, for example, between being a detached, rational person who reasons in a cold and detached way about the world on the one hand, and on the other hand, a person who wants to act and engage and participate in the world and be a man of action, a person of action. There's a conflict between those two things. Wanting to be just a cold reasoner, a person who rationally reasons about things, and somebody who wants to just act and be absorbed in the world. If they are just left on their own, and not, if those two desires, if those two goals are not met with each other, and we don't let them negotiate and come up with some reconciliation, then they present a conflict, and they can twist us. Another example is the conflict between thinking that he's a great intellect, he's extremely intelligent, a person of utmost intelligence on the one hand, and on the other hand thinking that he's worthless, he's a sick person, he's a liar, he's ultimately alone in the world. That's another kind of conflict that we read about. Another example is that in the domain of love and intimacy and friendship. On the one hand, he seeks love, he wants friendship and society. On the other hand, he wants to be a tyrant. He wants to dominate other people and rule over other people. And he wants to hurt them. Again, if those two desires don't meet and merge and don't negotiate with each other, they remain extreme and they remain irreconcilable. The thing about these fragments, so if a fragment, a force like wanting friends, wanting to belong to a group of friends, that's a fragment. That's one single desire, a goal. And on the other hand, we have the desire of not liking other people or wanting to dominate them. When these desires are isolated from other desires that they could be in negotiation with, they could actually be transformed by each other. If they're not led to contact or communicate with each other, they become very extreme and dogmatic. So because of the fragmented state of mind that this person has, this character, all of these positions that he expresses, they're all extreme and dogmatic. So he's dogmatic about his intelligence. He's dogmatic about his reasoning. He's reading books, for example. He's dogmatic about wanting to be a man of action. He's dogmatic about wanting to be a tyrant over other people, wanting to dominate other people. He's dogmatic about wanting friendship and love. Because, and the dogma and the extremeness comes from an absence of negotiation, an absence of a dynamic exchange between his multiple desires. Now, there are two outcomes of the lack of organization in his mind, this character's mind. One of them is relatively less interesting. The other one is, in my opinion, much more interesting. The less interesting consequence of a disorganized mind is that we don't achieve, we don't see from his perspective, we don't see a coherent narrative, and we don't experience him as having a coherent, a unified character. The more interesting consequence of it is that because of the lack of organization, certain bits of experience get into his purview, get into his mind. certain things would show up for him, and he gets a glimpse of them that I think he wouldn't appreciate if he wasn't in a state of fragmented and disorganization. Just like how, imagine an organization that is not very coherent, that is not very organized, a company that is not very organized, cannot protect itself against outsiders, against somebody who wants to come in and interfere with it, with the organization. In a similar way, a mind that is not organized cannot protect itself against counter-narrative experiences. So, some examples. He sees, this is, for me, extremely interesting and masterfully written by Dostoevsky. There is a part in the story where our main character, our main protagonist, is at a dinner gathering with his friends. They're not really his friends, but they're his acquaintances. And he doesn't get along with them. He embarrasses himself. He creates a lot of conflict with them. And there's this internal and external push and pull within himself and in his exchanges, in his communications with the friends. It's very nasty exchange and very awkward at some points. And then we have this passing reference to the waiter who is present there, who in the very beginning when our protagonist arrives, we see a very brief and passing description of the waiter who is just setting up the table. And at the very end, again, the waiter is cleaning up after them. We see this character, because of the fragmented state of his mind, he can get a glimpse and appreciate what is there in the perspective of a detached observer, an observer who is not as invested in the situation as he is. He gets access to something. It is very difficult to explain what it is that he has access to when he notices the waiter and the waiter's point of view. But he does have access to it. If he did have a very coherent narrative, like his friend, like his companions, he probably wouldn't have noticed as much, or he wouldn't have seen as much in the presence and the perspective of other people in the surrounding, like the waiter. In another part of the book, we see his exchange with Eliza, another character, and he confesses to Eliza about his evil, vicious intentions. And then Eliza responds positively to him with kindness. And he understands it, and he understands the kindness in Eliza's heart and in Eliza's response. He appreciates the kindness in it. He notices it. Within the fragmented state of mind that he has, a fragmented world within which all the different bits and pieces of experience show up for him, he notices the kindness of Eliza, even though he cannot appropriately respond to it, even though he cannot connect with it, but he sees it. So because of his fragmented state of mind, because of his twisted mind, his twisted being, he, in a way we can say, he sees more and more things in the world show up for him and intrude into his experience. So finally, at the end, when we read the book, we can ask ourselves, what is this problem with this character? What is it? If we have to describe it very briefly, what would we say is his core issue, his core problem? And we could say that it is his inability to integrate different tendencies he has, different desires that he has, inclinations, different goals. A very simple example would be the conflict, the two different desires between wanting friendship and not getting along with a particular group of friends. As I said already, if you let those desires remain insular from each other, remain separate from each other, they both remain dogmatic and extreme. But trying to integrate them will probably moderate both desires and let this individual arrive at a third position, a synthetic position, a synthesis of these two desires, where wanting friendship and not getting along with the friendship will together result in some kind of, after inner negotiation, some resolution, like a limited amount of time spent with friends, or trying to search for other friends. Yeah, I think that's good for now. There are other resources. I know of one important set of reviews on this book by my friend and philosophical mentor Gregory Sadler, and I'll leave links to his videos on Notes from Underground. His approach is very philosophical and very interesting to listen to. Um, if you have other thoughts, if you have read the book or are planning to read the book, if you have questions, comments, thoughts about Dostoevsky and this book in particular, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I will speak with you in the next video.